He says, "Hey, I've got this one, little house. It's an e-course, which is a long drive for me. I was in Warren at the time, and
Okay, yeah.
she's like, hey, you got to buy this house. It's this little dinky 2-bedroom frame on a crawl, no garage, no base, just this little thing,
Hmm.
but it was fairly cheap, 17,000 at the time,
Okay.
and so I actually sold an old Mustang I had. I still regret that. um, I
What year was the Mustang first off?
a
Because I'm a Mustang
69,
fan.
a 69
Oh
Fastback
shit.
actually. So yes, I brought that back from North Carolina. I found that when I was in the
to do better in their business, but I also have to.
I don't know how to do it.
Hey everyone out there in YouTube land and our Metro Detroit Off Market Facebook group. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It is Monday. Hope you don't have a case of the Mondays. But this great gentleman that we have here, I've known him for quite a while. With the meetups in this Metro Detroit area, I've looked to him for some advice on some things and try to sell them some deals as well. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. um, but Jay Peltier is a great guy to know in this area because not only is he an investor, but he is an open book, and that is one thing. The reason why I'm bringing him on here, I use the title expert in Section 8 because, in my opinion, every time I have a question about Section 8, I go to him. He's my guy that I go to if I have any questions about Section 8. But he's basically just going to go about his experience on Section 8, and we're going to tell his origin story, how he got started, and so on and so forth. So if you do have questions about anything that is pertaining to what we're talking about, please do put them in the chat. We'll answer them as we go. So without further ado, Jay, how you doing today?
Hello, everybody. I'm doing great, Randy.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay, for joining us. I know it's pretty late on a Monday, so I always appreciate it when anybody does come and join us. So with that being said, what, I know you don't like the word expert and everything, but we're just going to go by your experience, as far as Section 8 goes. In my opinion, you're an expert in Section 8. So even the littlest stuff, that's you're like an encyclopedia for it. So, but even general, even general in just in rentals and things like that, like you're awesome. So tell me a little bit about, let's back up here a little bit and say, how did you get started in real estate in general?
I would have to say my mother was the biggest influence in that, I suppose. She was a real estate agent for many years. And when
Okay.
I first got out of the Army, was bugging me. She worked for a guy that had untold hundreds of properties in Detroit in the metro area. And she kept saying that, hey, this is something you need to get into. I
Hmm.
always wanted something a little better than just, working a 9 to 5 job. I always had little side jobs and all, but
Right.
I was a little afraid at first to get into it. And
Yep.
she kind of prodded me a little bit, got me, spoke to a few people that, that were in the business. I suppose the one big guy in particular, his name's Rick Conflitti. He's been in the business forever. Uh,
Okay.
but so she says, "Hey, I've got this one, little house. It's an e-course, which is a long drive for me. I was in Warren at the time, and
Okay. Yeah.
she's like, hey, you got to buy this house. It's this little dinky 2-bedroom frame on a crawl, no garage, no base, just this little thing,
Hmm.
but it was fairly cheap, 17,000 at the time,
Okay.
and so I actually sold an old Mustang I had. I still regret that. um, I
What year was the Mustang first off?
a
Because I'm a Mustang
69,
fan.
a 69
Ah,
Fastback.
shit.
So yes, I brought that back from North Carolina. I found that when I was in the Army, and I sold that as part of the money to buy this property. I barely had enough money to buy the property, so I like was really like not paying my own gas and electric bill. They were like threatening to shut off while I was working on this property, and
Right.
I did 90% of the work myself, and I got it finished it, rented it probably 650 or 700 if I remember right. This is back in the
Mhm.
90s, and
Was it early 90s, mid 90s?
mid 90s,
Okay.
and I refied it about 6 months from when I bought the property. I got like 45,000 out of it, and
Mhm.
so apparently it was a good deal at 17,000 if I got 45 cash in my hand.
Yeah.
And I took that money and I bought 2 properties in Detroit, fixed both of them up, rented both of them, sold one, kept one.
Okay.
More
Okay.
properties in Detroit, fixed both of them up, rinse and repeat. So I did that for quite a while, and then kind of moved. I've done a little of everything, so that's the beginnings, I suppose, to answer your question.
Yeah. So you fixed 2 of them up. You sold one to get some cash now and kept one to keep some cash flow coming in. So
Exactly.
that's a smart idea right there.
It's the
So
Burr method, except I didn't
yeah.
necessarily refi. I sold one to pay. I did 2 at a time. So
So with that, what were interest rates at that time? I mean, because in the mid '90s they weren't no 5%,
no,
or
it'll
anything like
never
that.
be that again. I want to say that first one that I refied was probably in the 8 or 9%.
Okay.
And jumping forward in the story, I was a mortgage broker for 5 years or so in the 2000s. And
Okay.
I love to hear people, oh my God, I can't stand, 7% interest rate for, I was a subprime lender, and
Yeah.
rates can be anywhere from 12 to 18% for an investment property in the mid 2000s.
Right.
So, geez, 7% is terrible. No, it's not. Historically, we're still pretty good. This is about where we should be, actually. I think it went
Most
down.
definitely.
So, uh,
So Jason from the Facebook group says, "I love 7% interest."
yeah,
That's awesome. And Terry Penny is saying, "I hear you."
hi, Terry.
You hear me saying this all the time, so but yeah, 100%. And the thing is that, so tell me a little bit about, you started doing this. Was that it? Were you hooked? Did you just do nothing but real estate ever since then? Like, what
No,
was your progression?
I was an IT guy at the time.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I was kind of like doing 3 things at once. I was, had a day job, IT. I used
Hmm.
to fly to Chicago actually, 4 days a week and work over there in one of the hospitals as an IT guy.
Yep.
I'd come back for the weekends and I'd work on computers. And
Yep.
then in my spare time, I would fix up a house. you know, it's, I've always had kind of too many things in the hopper, but that was the starting of it. And then slowly but surely, I started getting a few more properties. And in the early 2000s, the company that I worked for, I worked for Dana Corporation. It was a big company.
Hmm.
Dana Rear Ends, an auto supplier, and I'd been there about 5 years, I think, at the time. And they went into bankruptcy. Told everybody,
Okay.
hey, this division is going to be sold off. There's
Right.
nothing to do. Everybody's going to be laid off, and just get used to it. You got about 3 months, and sure enough, about 3 months came, and
Hmm.
slowly but surely, I'm turning off everybody's passwords, and well, then my time came, and um, a buddy of mine that I had at the time, I called him up actually right after I got laid off. Even before I called my wife, I was still kind of, even though I knew it was happening, it's
Yeah.
still kind of,
It's still in
messed me up.
shock.
And
Yep.
called him up and said, oh, you got laid off. And he's like, come on to lunch with me. We'll talk. So he's a mortgage guy. and he owned a little
Okay.
real estate, a little mortgage company. And he said, during the lunch, he's like, you need to come to work with me. And I'm like, Neil, you've been trying to get me to come to you forever. I'm not a mortgage guy. I'm an IT guy. And he's like, no, you don't understand. My wife has already moved down to Florida with my kids. We already got a house down there. I want to retire and I want to go to Florida. Give me 6 months. The company will be yours. Just give me a little profit. That was a small real estate, small mortgage company, 5 employees or so, give or take. But it's still, it's not every day somebody says, hey, you're my buddy and I'm going to, give you their company.
Right.
That I did very well with it for a while. I was a loan officer, or started a processing loan officer, and then I ran the company for 5-7 years or so until the crash happened. And I did great, but I was a wholesaler at the time. I switched from doing rentals to flipping almost exclusively. I got rid of most of my rentals and started buying in Warren and in other, East Point, etc., Roseville, St. Clair Shores, whatever.
Good old Macomb County.
That was my bread and butter. I was born in Detroit, and that's whole East Side there. It was my bread and butter. So I started doing that, and of course, I was making money hand over fist. Wholesaling, I couldn't sleep at night, but I did it for a little while, making a lot of money with that.
Why couldn't you sleep at night doing wholesale? As a wholesaler, I want to know.
Well, I think we've had this discussion before, but as any good wholesaler, as in somebody that is truly going to make a lot of money, has to be a good liar.
Okay.
Honestly, you have to either lie to the buyer, lie to the seller, or lie to both. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't good wholesalers. I think you're one of the good ones there, Randy. But
thank you. I appreciate that.
There are people that will try to wholesale a property. Oh, they got it for 10,000 under contract and try and sell it for 50 or 100. That to me is not a good wholesaler. But there's making money, and then there's making money. And unfortunately, I was the latter. I made some really good money off of some people back then, and I could barely sleep at night with some of the stuff that this guy taught me, I guess you'd say. He was my best friend, but wasn't the most scrupulous guy in the world. And I learned a lot of, what I didn't want to be, I suppose, at that time. And
most definitely.
But
and that's kind of what I see. That's what I see a lot. It's just from the older, like now that you see that there are a lot of people out there, like, okay, yeah, you're dishonest. You were taught that way. It's like people can see through that now, and you're just going to double down on those lies, and it's just not going to work out. So I be as honest as possible. I may say things a little bit differently and not exactly use the right terminology where they would do it, but I tell them exactly what I'm doing, just in a different way. That's all, Absolutely. So I don't lie to them. I just say, hey, I'm working with my partners on this. I may pass it along to them, and I let them know up front that, hey, if I do this, you'll still be working with me throughout the whole time, and you'll get exactly what's in your contract. And I ask them, do you have a problem with that if we do go that route? And they're like, as long as I get what I'm promised, I don't care.
This just turned into the Randy Stedman interview, ladies and gentlemen.
I know, right? So, all right. So we'll get back to you. Sorry about that. But so with that being said, you went through, you were doing these mortgages, and then you were wholesaling. Essentially, were you wholesaling in them while you were doing the mortgages?
Yes. Had a couple people that would come to us and, say, hey, I've got this really cheap property and, can you buy it and it was a piece of junk. And we were, finding people that wanted to get into the investing game and really weren't that smart, essentially. Again, I wasn't proud of the things I did, but we would find, and in Detroit, I love how wholesalers love to call, the ARV value. Well, I had a property I was buying for $20,000 and I could get an appraisal the next day for $80,000 or $70,000. It's the same thing today. There's such a disparity between what a property truly is worth and what some people think it's worth, I guess. But so I was selling these properties, making these good, chump change in between. I did mortgages still. I still had my own flips that I was doing as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I just, and the important part here is I was spending like a madman, going on
Yes.
trips, and
Oh,
I built a 40 by 80 pole barn that cost me 70, $80,000. I bought a few
okay.
cars. I was fixing up my house. I moved up north and was fixing up my place and doing all these things and spending all this money. And this is in the 2007 and 2008 time frame, and I didn't have hardly any rentals left.
Eesh. Okay.
So I got to the point. I actually right around that time, the prices started kind of doing this.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I bought 3 properties right here. And then, of
Ooh.
course, like within a month or two, pew.
Yeah.
So I had 3 properties that, I thought I got a great deal on and spent, tons of money fixing the places up and tried to sell it. And it took me a solid year to sell these properties. I mean, I've said this
Mm-hmm.
story 100 times to people that are listening. I'm sure they've heard it, but um, the short of the story is that I was still spending money, like
Mm-hmm.
like nothing. Oh, it'll turn around. It'll turn around. Nobody ever saw that crash coming, and fixed the properties up, tried to sell them, and it took me a solid year to sell the properties. And I made about 5 grand profit on each one. I don't think I've ever lost money on any house I've ever bought. But when you're holding on to 3 properties for a solid year and made a
Yeah.
whopping $5,000 profit and
That
spending
holding
like a
cost.
madman, I
Yeah.
lost my
That
butt.
holding cost is
Yeah.
crazy.
So I lost my
So,
butt. I wish I would have stayed in the rental game. I could have, I have this argument with people, or had this argument with one person in particular. He's like, oh, well, the rentals went down in the crash. No, they didn't.
right.
They essentially wobbled 1% that whole from 2008 until 2014. So
Yeah.
if I would have had rentals and bought more rentals at the time instead of the flipping, I'd have been sitting pretty, you know.
So, did you learn from your mistake? And
I did.
when
I
'09
learned.
hit, did you pick up more properties?
Yes. Again, I got out of the crash broke. I had, I think, 1 property at the time, and I went to work for somebody else. I
Mm-hmm.
was project manager, and I pretty much ran his construction, did 300 or 400 properties for the guy over about a 5-year period, give or take. Him and another guy as well. One of them's in these groups, but
Mm-hmm.
did a lot of properties for other people, and just slowly but surely accumulated enough money and survived essentially. That was my day
Yep.
job, and to where I had enough to buy a decent sized flip. Had a really close relationship and still do with Macomb County Habitat for Humanity, and I
Okay.
bought a property from them that was not an old property at all. And actually, I think it was built in the 2000s, and put
Okay.
a ton of money into fixing it up. Sold it. I flipped again, and made
Mm-hmm.
enough money to where I really, in the 2015 Wayne County auction, I bought 9 properties that year.
Got it.
So it just, it took me a while to make enough money to get back in the game. And then I just kind of never looked back. I'll sell a property here and there, but
Yeah.
generally I'm a buy and hold guy, and I'm 99% Section 8. I don't advertise anything but Section 8 for my rentals. So
Okay. And so, where are your properties now? You said it's in like Macomb County. Do you still have your? Do you still do Detroit properties as well?
most of my properties are in Detroit. Detroit has
Okay.
been monumental for me. That's my
Mhm.
catchphrase. If you look at any of my other videos, is that Detroit is by far the best return on your investment, but it can also
Oh,
be the biggest, you know, problem. The
yes.
biggest risk to your investment is the word I use. But most of my properties are in Detroit. I've got a couple dozen at the time right now.
Okay.
Um, I pretty much just stopped at 20 for like several years. I just said, that's the
Yep.
number, and I don't want it anymore. And then I got bored. Semi-retirement is boring, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, so I bought
So,
more there, and
real quick, Steve SG had a question. Hey Jay, did you ever think about investing in Chicago while you were working there? If no, why not?
That was actually really early on in my investing, and
Okay.
I never hardly went anywhere. In fact, I was 3 blocks from Wrigley Field, the hospital I was working in, and never went to a Cubs game. So I never really had time to work on stuff. I did go to a Chi Sox game, but not a Cubs game. But it was
Okay.
too early on, and properties back then were, it's still, Chicago is just expensive. So
Yeah. So
there was once a day that I would pray for you. I'd go and misbehave just so you'd notice too. Sneaking looks up and down from across the room. And damn, what a hell of a view.